Class 1A sits at the top of popularity in terms of a lot of anime groups. It has a lot of characters that a lot of people love, so when it comes to the idea of transporting them to another universe, finding roles for them is essential. And what if all of Class 1A was a pirate crew in the One Piece universe? What roles would they have, and what would they do? So let's go ahead and find out. So one of the first things we have to establish is everyone's roles within the crew, and I'm going to go ahead and explain it piece by piece. But before we do that, we have to start with the captain. Now, I think there can only be one character that can be the captain, and that's Deku. Deku's the character with a dream. I'm thinking this universe, it's probably something more like protecting people than necessarily being king of the pirates, but I don't exactly see Class 1A being Marines, because Marines end up serving the world government in this universe. And despite where My Hero has gone within recent, 100 chapters, a lot more of One Piece would probably revolve around them being a slightly nicer pirate crew. But still, I would definitely say that Deku is the captain. Now, truth be told, I think that, One for All would be a great boost to the captain. It basically makes him one of the most prowess physical fighters on the whole crew. Plus, Deku's pretty smart. He's tactically smart in My Hero, so I feel like that kind of smarts would lead well to a lot of raids or ship-to-ship combat in the One Piece universe. Overall, he's pretty well set for it, especially considering some of the other characters that we're going to have in the command structure. Now, as his number 2, I'm going to go ahead and say that would be Todoroki. Now, I know that sounds kind of odd because I know some people would probably have put Bakugo there or maybe Ida, but no. When it comes to the character that he needs to depend on in any kind of a pinch or that could end up being a leader in his own right, it's Todoroki. Shoto has always demonstrated that. That's why in the Stain arc, he's one of the ones that comes to help when they're fighting Stain in the alleyway. In many ways, he is the closest thing that Deku has to a Zoro. And so I feel like that's a good role for him, Plus, all of the other crew members would respect him, something that is absolutely essential for him to be the number 2 member of the crew. Plus, much like Deku, his quirk lends its way well to being a perfect combat power, which means he would be one of the strongest fighters on the crew in general, whether on board the ship or off of it. Now, if you did want to know where I think Bakugo should be, I would actually put him as the cook. Now, funny enough, that does not have anything to do with his powers. It has to do with the fact that he's one of the few characters in My Hero Academia that everybody likes his cooking. They say he's a really great cook, and I think that is just a perfect reason to put him in this spot. Plus, an analogy for that would be that it makes him really comparable to Sanji, and that means that he'd still have the 3rd most represented combat spot on the crew, but he's in a position that he can actually do something else for them, which is keep them alive by not letting them starve to death. I think that works really well for him. Plus, it might help with his attitude adjustment issues, because let's be honest, in a pirate crew, you can't have the same antisocial behavior that you do in a school. Next up, I think that Uraraka would make a great helmswoman. I think the reason for that is because with her quirk, she could make the ship fly. Kind of like Shiki's power in the One Piece film, and I feel like that's just incredibly potent. Yes, technically she's only displayed that in some of the anime-only episodes of My Hero Academia, but let's be honest, in One Piece, everybody has much higher trajectory than they do in a lot of their own shows. It's one of the reasons that One Piece tends to be more popular for its power system. So in this universe, Uraraka probably could float the ship. She could probably float the ship pretty consistently. And I feel like that would make her excellent as a navigator. Not really a navigator, but as a helmsperson. And because of that, the ship would just glide through situations. She could even take the ship out of the water and over islands or over land if necessary, which I think would be a big boost. Talk about making it easier to get to Skypiea. Now, speaking of Navigator, since I dropped that already, I feel like a good choice for Navigator is Ida. He's good at keeping everyone on course. He always wants to keep the crew organized. He's very smart. We know that because of his class rankings. He fits very well into this definition of the Navigator. Plus, kind of like Todoroki and Uraraka, he's respected enough that people will listen to him in the emergency scenario. So I feel like that's a good position to give him. It keeps the ship on course. Plus, his speed makes it easier for him to jet around the ship in combat scenarios. And as well as giving him better sense of navigation. Plus, it makes him a pretty good scout if they ever need to lead the ship. And speaking of scouts, I feel like a good set of scouts would be Asui, Koda, and Shoji. Now, the reason that I say that is because those 3 characters have great abilities to scout. Asui can swim, as well as the fact she can kind of turn invisible a little bit, and then she also has her frog powers for mobility. Shoji's ability pretty much gives him the ability to see or scan, detect anything with the 5 human senses. And then Koda's ability to talk to animals, both for long-range scouting and gathering information in general, all make them excellent additions to the crew for that specific purpose. And I feel like that's a good thing, whether they plan on going into combat, whether they need to sneak into an area, whether they need to just scout out a new island that's been found and look for dangers. Those are free characters that would do really well with that. Now, I know some people would say, well, Higakure would make a good scout, and I do think that that's true, but I think that her role on this ship would be spy. The reason I would make her that spy is because invisibility is a great perk in that department. There's also a case argument for making her like a thief, because thief does seem to be a role that pops up a little bit in One Piece. It's not super essential, and unfortunately, because her quirk is only to herself, not to objects, she couldn't really boost anything too large, although I would love if she could. Because if it worked like Absalom's Devil Fruit and she could just coat other things in invisibility, that would be great. But even just for gathering information, sneaking on board other ships to see what was going on, she's great in the spy department. Which kind of leads us back around to our own ship, because another very important role that we haven't filled yet is Quartermaster. Now, Quartermaster is the person that supplies the ship. They make sure that everything is in order. They make sure they have enough supplies for the journey. The Straw Hats doesn't actually have somebody that fills this role, but most of the other pirate ships do. And I feel like the perfect person for this role is Yaoyorozu. Yaoyorozu's ability to make things automatically fills this role. And her intelligence and her statistical planning make her perfect for making sure that they have everything they need for the voyage, ranging from food to munitions to supplies, all of it. So that's a perfect role for her. And again, kind of like Navigator and, the second mate, it is perfectly important that the crew has to be able to respect the Quartermaster. As a matter of fact, Quartermaster is usually a elected role. It's a role that's usually voted on. So I could totally see Yaoyorozu getting that, especially with her later upgrades to her confidence and stuff. Now, okay, so when I was mentioning the scouts, you probably noticed another character got left off the list. And that's because I would normally think that this character, Jiro, would have been added to the scouts. And in almost any other universe, she would have. But she can fill a much better role with a couple of other characters for the ship, and that is musical entertainment. I firmly believe that Jiro is the leader, but then Ashito, Kaminari, and even Mineta would make a great on-ship band. And that was kind of a role that was had. A lot of pirates did have some musical ability, if not for self-entertainment than anything else. But I feel like if it was of vital importance to the Straw Hats to get an entertainer, a lot of the other ships do tend to have at least one person who's skilled in music. This ship would have at least 4. And that is definitely worth talking about, because that is something to keep morale up, and I feel like Jiro is perfect for that, as are the other characters. Of course, these 3 characters, Ashito, Jiro, and Kaminari, all perfect for combat, and Mineta is good for capture, which he is in the show as well, if they're not trying to, hang him off the side of the ship as bait for fish. Next, I would probably put Kirishima, Sato, and Ojiro over on basically like Ship's Watch / Ship's Defense. All of them have really strong abilities, but they require either a lack of mobility or a supply source like sugar in the case of Sato, or in the case of, Ojiro, his tail is a useful ability, but it's not substantial compared to against a lot of the other things you're going to see in the One Piece universe. And probably he could use the ship's rigging and stuff as a source of power, because he could just bounce back and forth between it. So I would put them on as Ship's Watch, which makes them highly effective in that regard, and we don't have to worry about them necessarily getting caught out in the open. Of course, they could be deployed as part of landing parties or boarding parties as necessary, but I see them more as defensive options for the ship. Now, speaking of boarding parties and our absolute offense that don't already have roles on the ship, I would strongly say that Tokoyami would be a boarding party member, as would Yuga Aoyama. Now, the key aspect here is I do think that these characters, when I say boarding party, I really mean offensive members. And I say that it's kind of funny because there's more than a few offensive-based quirks in this group. I think their quirks are great for ship-to-ship combat or bombarding the shore if necessary. If you think about any time that, it's kind of funny because in regular One Piece, it doesn't come up for the Straw Hats, it comes up for more of the other crews, but there usually isn't a lot of ship-to-ship combat for the Straw Hats. In the case that this would happen to the Class 1A ship, these two characters, in particular because of Dark Shadow and the belly button laser, would make excellent offense. I think you would probably couple that somewhat with long-range attacks from Todoroki and Yaoyorozu with her cannons, but those two would definitely probably be the first line of offensive long-range targeting, as well as the fact that I do think Tokigami's quirk would allow him to intercept some shots aimed at the ship. And I do think that, you know, in terms of the rigging, which I talked about earlier, Sero is a great choice for maintaining the rigging, as well as helping to repair the ship, because I feel like he would be a secondary carpenter, you know, because you had the primary ship's carpenter and then you had a secondary one. So he would be able to just kind of go around and patch things as they happen, which leaves who would be the ship's main carpenter. And this is where I'm going to import a character who wasn't actually in Class 1A, but probably should have been because of how much she's beloved by the audience. But I feel like Hatsume is a great addition as the ship's carpenter / inventor. She would be there to help generate any ideas that they might need for inventions. She could repair the ship. She'd probably upgrade the ship so that it would be on par with the Sunny. And just in general, I think that's the last addition. I wouldn't necessarily add anyone else from My Hero, but I feel like if they had to bring one extra person, that's the person you'd want to bring. But what do you think? Do you guys think this would make a fearsome pirate ship in the One Piece universe? And is there any other ships from other universes you would want to see? Let me know in the comments below.